No one can see my shirt, but I am wearing a Disney merch shirt with the villains on it. So I, like many others, have been fascinated by the life and legacy of Walt Disney. He's one of the reasons I love drawing and animation, and his vision of the future and innovative ideas revolutionized the film and theme park industries. Though he's remembered as good old Uncle Walt, almost as much as he's remembered as an anti-Semite, racist, and unfeeling boss, he never really cared about being remembered for any of those things. Disney wanted to be someone who touched the everyday lives of people, who would invent something that would revolutionize the way we live. And maybe he wanted to do that in order to obfuscate what was, in his opinion, a tarnished legacy of being a creator of kiddie rides and kiddie movies. As he famously said, fancy being remembered around the world for the invention of a mouse. And maybe he also wanted to reinvent his legacy towards the end of his life in order to hide the fact that he was being remembered as a mean-spirited boss and racist. And though he died never completing his vision of the future, nor solidifying his legacy in his mind as a titan of industry, he was remembered, for better or for worse, as one of the most influential Americans to have ever lived. Hey everyone, my name's Cheyenne and I'm an Asian American adoptee and expat living in Brazil. I post new videos about race, feminism, and pop culture every Tuesday and Friday, so if you're into that, please subscribe and ring the bell. And if you didn't know this already, I'm also over on Patreon. For just $2 a month, you get to see all of my videos early, and for $5 a month, you get your name in the ending credits, and also access to Patreon-only content. So if you're into that, head over to Patreon. The link is in the description. My last Patreon-only video was about my college experience, and the poll is now up to vote for December's Patreon-only video, and it will probably be about my 2020 presidential election thoughts. So if you want to know those, head over to Patreon and vote, and you'll get access to that video if you're a $5 patron. So yeah, let's get back to the video. Actually, before we start the video, I should also mention that I'm hosting a free art commission giveaway, and I will announce the winner once I reach 1,000 subscribers. So head over to that video, read the instructions, and enter. And I just want to say thank you so much for almost 1,000 subscribers. And also, again, thank you to my patrons. I did not thank them before, so thank you. And yeah, okay, now let's get back to the video. So this video is going to be about Walt Disney, the man, his legacy, and his reputation post-mortem. And before I start this video, I should mention that this topic is heavily influenced by Defunctland's YouTube channel, which dives more deeply or deeper into Walt Disney as a person and his legacy. So if you're into that, go check out their channel. And this video is also heavily influenced by Neil Gabler's biography, Triumph of the Triumph of the American Imagination. So without further ado, let's go. So part 1, Walt Disney, the beginning. I think we in the 21st century forget that the Walt Disney Corporation, which today has become an all-encompassing media conglomerate, was started by just a guy with a dream. A guy who loved cartoons and animation and wanted to prove that animation was high art. And though he loved his early work, like his Alice comedies, which mixed live action with animation, and his Silly Symphony cartoons with Mickey Mouse, what he really wanted to do was create a full-length animated movie, and thus Snow White was born. In 1937, the film graced theaters, as well as swept the Academy Awards, and seemingly revolutionized the film industry. The film was made on one of Walt and his company's first inventions, the multiplane camera, which used glass panes in order to have a type of layering effect.
From his view, we can see how each level or plane can move independently of the others. You might be thinking that it looks as flat as the old-fashioned type of cartoon background. In fact, it does while it holds still. The trick of the multiplane camera is movement.
The multiplane camera used in Snow White and subsequent Disney movies was invented by Bill Garrity, but Ub Iwerks, who left Disney in 1930 and would come back in 1940, also created one, and other animation studios were also trying their hand at it. But Garrity's multiplane camera was the first to be used in an animated feature film. This, of course, made the process faster and easier to create more detailed scenes and backgrounds, as not everything was drawn and shot on one layer. The more common animation technique during the early days of animation was the cutout animation technique, but Disney knew that that wasn't where the future of animation was going. Instead, he and his team not only invented the multiplane camera, but the business model of employing people to do the in-between frames of an animation. Disney wanted his animations to be hand-drawn shot for shot. So he hired keyframe animators who would draw the more key parts of the animation, whereas the lower and less paid employees would do the in-between shots.
He looks through the paper at the character he has previously outlined and draws the next movement in correct position. This clever animator is using a mirror to capture a tricky facial expression like this.
This was important for cutting costs and producing more faster. The multiplane camera was then used for other iconic Disney movies such as Pinocchio, Fantasia, Dumbo, Bambi, and more. And these 4 movies, along with Snow White of course, were some of Walt's passion projects. He wanted to continue to prove that animation could be for all ages and even high art, especially with his Fantasia venture set to classical music, which was even a bit more risque and also a lot more racist. Unfortunately, Pinocchio, Fantasia, and Bambi only found modest success at the time of their release. This was partly due to the fact that World War II was gearing up in Europe, and thus European profits took a downturn. Dumbo, Walt's 4th film, did do well and was produced cheaply. However, the studio was still in debt due to the financial flops of the other films. So Disney and his brother Roy took a public stock offering and made several pay cuts. And this, of course, didn't really help the fact that Disney already didn't have a good relationship with his staff. Though at times there was a fraternity-like atmosphere, he was still their boss and they were still his subordinates. He rarely gave out compliments, and after he moved everyone to Burbank, to a studio Disney himself designed, a rigid hierarchy was put into place. Disney designed this studio with his team in mind, even thinking about putting apartments there to make it easier for his employees to go to work. And though he thought he was doing what was best for everyone, he was only really doing what was best for him and his top guys. There was a gymnasium, steam room, and restaurant in the new Burbank studio, but those perks were only for Disney's elite employees. The rest of the animators, such as the non-keyframe animators, did not get access to those perks. And in fact, some animators were making up to $300 a week, whereas other animators were only making around $12 a week. There were talks about forming a union, but Disney refused and instead called an assembly with his crew. In February of 1941, he said to his 1,200 employees, "In the 20 years I've spent in this business, I've weathered many storms. It's been far from easy sailing. It required a great deal of work, struggle, determination, competence, faith, and above all, unselfishness. Some people think we have a class distinction in the place. They wonder why some people get better seats in the theater than others. They wonder why some men get spaces in the parking lot and others don't. I have always felt, and always will feel, that the men that contribute the most to the organization should, out of respect alone, enjoy some privileges. My first recommendation to the lot of you is this: put your own house in order. You can't accomplish a damn thing by sitting around and waiting to be told everything. If you're not progressing as you should, instead of grumbling and growling, do something about it." And they did do something about it. They striked. The strike lasted for 5 weeks in May of 1941, during the production of Dumbo. Disney responded by firing 17 animators, including Art Babbitt, one of the higher-ups at the time. In the end, the National Labor Relations Board had to step in and Disney was forced to sign the contract. After, he and his top guys left to go on a goodwill trip through South America. When he came back, tensions had settled and Disney started to feel distrustful of his studio. He prided himself on being able to put creative people together and make magic, but of course that magic had to be made under his supervision, approval, and scrutiny, and people just don't work well that way. They wanted to have a say in their work lives and with their boss, but Disney wasn't having it. After the 1940s, during which Disney helped produce some propaganda shorts for the US government, he became disillusioned with animation. He then decided to move on to his next big project, Disneyland.
Or the hub, is the heart of Disneyland. Shooting out from here, like the 4 cardinal points of the compass, Disneyland is divided into 4 cardinal realms. The 4 different worlds from which our television shows will originate. They are Adventureland, Tomorrowland, Fantasyland, and Frontierland.
As Disney focused on creating his theme park, he left the studio to the 9 old men, top animators at the studio. They went back to the fairy tale formula and produced Cinderella, which helped bankroll the other films of the decade, including Lady and the Tramp, Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland, and Sleeping Beauty. In the meantime, Walt created WED Enterprises, his engineering firm that would take over the creation of Disneyland. Disney was first inspired to create a smaller theme park entitled Mickey Mouse World with a train, as Walt loved trains. But of course, his ambitions grew bigger, and eventually Disneyland opened in 1955. The biggest innovation of Disneyland being the spoken wheel layout of the park, and of course its extremely immersive atmosphere, attention to detail, and storytelling. At Disneyland, Walt recreated his small hometown of Marceline, Missouri, as seen in the main street of the park, Main Street, USA. Walt knew exactly how to market this park and knew exactly what white America wanted. He knew that they, like him, yearned to go back to this small town atmosphere with gingerbread houses and horses and buggies. And of course, with vintage trains and the Wild West in Frontierland. But of course, Disney, always being a man of contradictions, was also a futurist. This showed up in the Tomorrowland area of the park, which displayed the world as it might be in 1985. And one of the e-tickets at the time was of course the monorail, though it didn't debut in Disneyland until 1959, as Disney himself was somewhat obsessed with transportation. He loved old trains, but he also wanted to create something new for future generations of Americans, illustrating that Walt was already preoccupied with his legacy and thinking about the end of his life in 1955 when he was just 54 years old. Disneyland satisfied him for a bit, and he thought, just like how he did with animation, that this is what he was going to be remembered for. But even though the park was innovative and overall just really awesome, he was still thought of as the kiddie ride guy. The park definitely gave him more credibility, and some people even wanted him to run for office, but most people just saw him as an entertainment guy, not an industry tycoon who would change the way Americans lived their everyday lives. And this, of course, wasn't helped by the fact that to fund Disneyland, he had adopted a friendly TV persona for his ABC appearances on Walt Disney's Disneyland and Disneyland Presents. He made a deal with ABC that they would help fund Disneyland if he appeared on regular TV specials where he'd drum up interest in the park and talk about his other ventures. There, Walt Disney would appear as we all like to believe he was, soft-spoken, kind, and welcoming. And he did play that role really well, almost to his own detriment. Though he loved his theme parks and films, they weren't necessarily what he wanted to be remembered for. He wanted to be known as a great boss, as someone who could bring people together, and also someone who could change the everyday life of his fellow man. Soon after Disneyland opened, talks about the New York World's Fair started. The fair would take place in 1964, and Walt thought that this was his chance to finally be taken seriously and solidify his legacy. He was then contracted by Robert Moses to design attractions for GE, Coke, and Ford. Disney tried pushing the monorail onto Robert Moses, as he truly believed that the monorail could help traffic flow and also help the general public, but Moses turned down the idea. So Disney and his engineers continued on making the best attractions they could. With Ford, he and his company created a conveyor belt system for fairgoers to test the cars on, entitled Ford's Magic Skyway. This would later translate to the People Mover, another form of retro-futuristic public transit that was later implemented in Disneyland Park. Next, Disney created the It's a Small World attraction for Pepsi-Cola after the deal with Coke fell through. And lastly, for GE, they created the Carousel of Progress, which starred audio animatronics and a rotating theater. Disney also created a special Abraham Lincoln animatronic for the fair entitled Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, where Lincoln recited the Gettysburg Address.
We all declare for liberty. But in using the same word, we do not all mean the same thing.
It was a huge achievement in engineering and robotics, and of course would change theme parks forever. However, the public didn't really see an everyday use for animatronics as impressive as they were. And though Disney's presence at the World's Fair was an overall success and illustrated to him and his company that the East Coast market was ready to be tapped by Walt, Walt still wasn't satisfied and knew that his time was almost up. So, part 2, the end of a man's life. After the World's Fair, Walt decided to create his most ambitious project yet.
A project so vast, it has already been called a whole new Disney World. And now, here is Walt Disney.
Welcome to a little bit of Florida here in California. This is where the early planning is taking place for our so-called Disney World project. Now, the purpose of this film is to bring you up to date about some of the plans for Disney World. We know what we hope to accomplish. And believe me, it's the most exciting and challenging assignment we've ever tackled at Walt Disney Productions.
He decided that he was going to open a second theme park in Florida, as well as open his experimental prototype community of Tomorrow, or Epcot. In 1964, Disney was kind of riding high, but he was also near the end of his life as he would die 2 years later. He had just released his passion project, Mary Poppins, to phenomenal success, and also debuted his new inventions at the World's Fair. But of course, he wanted more. He wanted to bring himself inside people's homes, not in the form of movies and kiddie entertainment, but by improving their lives through innovative inventions like the monorail and people mover, which would both be present in his prototypical community of Tomorrow. So, to put it simply, Epcot was going to be a company town on steroids. People who worked at Disney's Florida park were going to live there and also try out new inventions. Disney didn't just want the town to be a company town. He also wanted it to be a place where industry giants such as GE and Ford would test their new inventions and show them off to the public. Walt wanted to create public parks designed by him and implement his own types of transportation. He also wanted to solve crime and improve education, as he already helped create CalArts, an animation school in California in 1961. He wanted the city to be completely his, and use it to show that Disney isn't just a maker of theme parks and animated movies, but also a city planner, and not just any city planner, but the best one you've ever seen. Walt wanted to help people improve their lives, and it was an innocent enough dream. But he also wanted total control. The employees would be on display, testing out new inventions, and no private property could be owned. For example, people's front lawns would be for the guests visiting Epcot and the Florida park. Disney also didn't want people to own cars, as that was what he was trying to avoid. He wanted Epcot to be a city that was planned with a car already in mind, as he didn't really like cars. He wanted to put the pedestrian first, which was great, but he also didn't want people to form a homeowners association or self-govern. No matter how many times people close to him tried to convince him that you can't just switch appliances in and out of someone's house, he never understood why people just didn't let him rule. You can't tell people how to live their lives, and you can't kick someone out of their house if they get fired, and he just didn't want to hear it. And yet, the Florida project kept going. Disney was giving his engineers so much work that they'd probably be busy for the next 50 years with Epcot alone, if they were fully to commit to it, that is. And that's what Disney wanted. He wanted total control over his company and his legacy, even after he could no longer have a say in it. And up until the day he died, this is what Disney worked on. This was it. This was what he was going to be remembered for. But alas, he wasn't. After Disney died due to lung cancer, the Florida project moved forward, but without the inclusion of the experimental prototype city of Tomorrow. Instead, Epcot found a new home at Disney World as a separate theme park that opened in 1982, around a decade after Disney World itself opened in 1971. And though we might see Walt Disney as a petty and money-grubbing man who was never satisfied, even with all the success in the world, I personally find his story to be extremely sad. It's sad to know how unfulfilled he felt towards the end of his life, even though he accomplished so many great things. He did touch people's hearts and change the world of animation for the better. He did revolutionize theme parks and give people that sweet American nostalgia that he knew we crave so much of. And yet, he didn't really seem to care about that all too much. And it's sad to know that his dream project never came to fruition. I mean, it's good that Epcot didn't come to fruition and that he didn't get everything that he wanted, but it is still kind of sad to me that after a life of wins, he died kind of frustrated. And I didn't even know the guy, and I feel sad for him. When I watched the footage of him in one of his last TV appearances talking about Epcot and seeing how excited he was about it, it makes me want to cry. And maybe that's just propaganda at work, but maybe it also has something to do with the human connection.
We know what we hope to accomplish. And believe me, it's the most exciting and challenging assignment we've ever tackled at Walt Disney Productions.
So, part 3, Walt and Legacy. Walt seems so unknowable and so untouchable, but deep down he really was just a guy. Though we like to put him on a pedestal, Walt was just a human being with faults and flaws, and I think that's why we like to talk about him so much. His legacy isn't really about him and his media conglomerate or his theme parks, but about dissecting who Walt really was. On one hand, people love to remember him as a good guy who knew what was best, even though he was kind of power hungry. And on the other hand, people just can't wait to jump at the opportunity to call Walt a racist and an anti-Semite and a strict and unloving boss. Or even bring up the already dead rumor that Walt froze his body to be brought back to life once science was capable of doing so. Which honestly does make a lot more sense when you think about how obsessed he was with legacy and control. And in the end, Walt is all of those things. Well, not the frozen body one, but he is just a complicated guy like any of us. Isn't that right, Maleficent? People are multifaceted, even people who are marketed as all good or all bad. And I think that that's what Walt's legacy teaches us. That no matter how much we want to pigeonhole him, he cannot be pigeonholed. And I think that we can all relate to wanting to be remembered a certain way and not being able to control that. Even Walt, the millionaire that he was, wasn't able to control his legacy. And honestly, I think that's a good thing. I do think that the truth about his past being open to the public is a good thing so we can make our own assumptions about him. But we should never try to push one narrative over another just to further our own agendas. Instead, we should just try to make as much sense out of him as possible. Disney was anti-union and anti-Semitic, and even turned people into the government during the Communist Red Scare. He stated that Herbert Sorrell, David Hilberman, and William Pomerantz, former animators and labor union organizers, were communist threats to the government. He joined the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals, which was basically a Let's Make America Great Again organization. Most people don't like to see Walt as that deep, a guy who just loved trains because they were big and fast. And many people don't see his Main Street USA as an act of unfettered patriotism. Rather, it's just a guy wanting to relive his childhood like all of us. But it does get kind of deep when you know what organizations he was in and what he thought of the communist threat and labor organizing. Which is honestly quite ironic when he was totally fine working with former Nazis. In the end, he did try to distance himself from these organizations and their beliefs, and I do think that he regretted being part of those organizations and turning people into the government, or maybe he only regretted that he got caught. Sure, he wasn't a card-holding member of the KKK, but like many of his contemporaries, he was racist and anti-Semitic, and we shouldn't be surprised nor try to act like those prejudices didn't exist back then or weren't normalized and reflected in Walt's art, especially the pieces he worked on. In Neil Gabler's biography, he states that Walt Disney was no racist. He either publicly nor privately made disparaging remarks about blacks or asserted white superiority. Like most white Americans of his generation, however, he was racially insensitive. And it's like, that's what being racist is, Neil. And it's moments like these that make me realize that when you call white people racist, like how crazy they get, because they think that being called racist means that they're like this terrible, horrible, evil person that can't be redeemed, when no, we all hold racist beliefs and that's fine as long as you're working on them. And we definitely shouldn't erase the fact that history is racist and people existed in the past that were racist, because that's what history is and that's fine. And it's fine that Disney was racist and we shouldn't ignore that part of him. And it's very obvious in Fantasia and Dumbo, movies he himself worked on and approved, that he was racist, and that those beliefs manifested themselves in his work. And yeah, that's shitty, but pretending that he wasn't racist or that he didn't hold racist beliefs or that he was an exceptional white guy isn't really helping. He looked up to Henry Ford, for Christ's sake. We can acknowledge his achievements and humanity while also acknowledging his racist beliefs and how those were perpetuated through his movies. We can't just act as if that wasn't part of who he was. Disney is also remembered for being pro-American, so pro-American that he recreated America right in his backyard the way he wanted to remember it. He was a futurist who loved nostalgia, especially as he got older and turned more conservative in his thinking. But he also knew that he wasn't alone in this wanting to go back to the past and profited off of that longing. And that's of course fine, but it gets problematic when that rose-colored vision of the past isn't shared by everyone. It's obvious that Disney as a person doesn't really mesh well with our more progressive thinking. Not just in this time period, of course, but of even his own contemporary time, where people of color were fighting for their rights while he was making his millions. And it's not a pretty picture to look back on, but that's American history, and most of the times it's pretty painful to confront. But that doesn't mean that you should defend it blindly or try to cover it up, but rather you should just let it be and look at it as a place that we should never be again. But unfortunately, we are kind of in that bad place right now, with that small billionaire elite class making more money by the day, while regular everyday people suffer. But unlike the past, we're more connected than ever, and can band together to stop class inequality and raise awareness about injustices all over the world. So, the conclusion. Disney is remembered so fondly, even by me, and I do think that's part of clever marketing and how Disney as a company has become part of our identities as Americans. But he shouldn't just be remembered one way, but multiple ways, as he was a person with many faces throughout his life. In all, my feelings about Walt as a person are conflicting. When I learned about the later years of his life and how sad and frustrating they were, it made me sad in turn. But at the same time, he did do irreparable harm to people at his studio and also through his movies. Though my feelings are conflicting, I do think that it's better than being 100% pro or against the man that I'll only ever really know through books and through the layers of time. One thing I didn't mention in the video is how Walt Disney is so ubiquitous with that of a genius and CEO. Much like Einstein, Disney embodies this dual persona of being loving, kind, and funny, but also cold, reserved, and quiet. And Disney's legacy, or what we make of him from the bits and pieces we know about him, informs character tropes to this day. The charismatic genius who's not perfect by any means, but still respected, albeit from a distance. This is seen in The Circle, a book I just reviewed on this channel, and even how we remember Steve Jobs. It's interesting how just a phantom of a person no one ever really knew, or at least could put into words or even a character in a piece of media, informs our own ideas of what they were like and what others similar to them must also be like. So that's the end of the video. So what do you think about Walt Disney's life and legacy? Let me know in the comments down below. His company has definitely warped into something else, but I'll never forget that it started with just one really determined guy. I don't really have a grand conclusion to this one, but it does feel good to talk about someone that I do truly think about a lot. So that's it for this video. If you liked it, please give it a like, leave a comment, share it with someone, ring the bell and subscribe, and next video is going to be about Over the Moon and representation. So yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.